stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host. He's English, not Australian. Richard Gleave.
Hello again, Ultra Runner friends. This is the Choose to Endure podcast dedicated to you, the back of the pack ultra runners who are redefining possible one epic journey at a time. Today, I am super pleased to be joined by someone who's a veteran of multiple 50K and 50-mile races with many successes, including 2 Moab 240 finishes, which I think is absolutely incredible. He's also experienced a fair few DNFs along the way over the past 7 years or so, and has recently been featured in a How It All Started Run Try Mag article. He is with us today to talk about his most recent Moab conquest this past October. So a huge welcome and thank you very much for joining the uber cool Mr. Casey Sanders. Casey, how's it going, man? I think the last time our paths crossed might have been early hours of the morning and a few thousand feet up a mountain. So this feels a whole lot more reasonable for sure on a nice afternoon here. How are you doing, sir?
I'm great. Thank you for having me. And I think the last time we crossed paths, we were at like 10,000 feet of elevation in the Abayo Mountains outside of Moab. So,
it was pretty chilly up there, I think, from what I recall. To kick us off, for folks who maybe haven't read the Run Try Mag article, maybe you can start us with a little bit about your background in ultra running and what initially sort of drew you to the sport.
Yeah, I've never really been very athletic. I think the Run Try Bike magazine article is titled "From Last Picked in Gym Class to Ultra Runner," which is a pretty accurate portrayal. Definitely was not athletic growing up. Was actually last picked in gym class in like junior high and high school.
Tough spot to be.
Yeah, definitely. But it's interesting. I got older. I had kids, started a family, and had gained a pretty unhealthy amount of weight. I think I was probably pushing up against 300 pounds. And then I had a neighbor who had a road bike, and he was like, "You should take it for a spin." And all of my cycling experience had been on, Walmart Huffy bikes and whatever. And this guy was super into road biking, so his bike was probably worth more than my car at the time. And I took it for a spin around the block and was like, "Wow, I can actually go fast on a bike, and it feels good." So, so I went out and got a road bike, and like an entry level all aluminum road bike, and started riding. And I kind of got hooked on the cardio stuff and just started riding. I was riding like 4 or 5 miles a day. And then I started riding like 100 miles a week and was like, "Oh my God, I'm losing weight.
Oh,
this
man.
is great."
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And then I live here in Utah and it's really cold in the winter. So winter rolled around and I put my bike on a trainer and started riding on Swift and I just spent, hours a day just grinding out miles on a video game basically, and lost a bunch of weight. I was kind of on the verge of a divorce at the time, and I had told my ex-wife that I was going to run a marathon. And she was like, "Right, you hate running." And I did. And I was like, "Yeah, but it seems like a good challenge." And so, things kind of fell apart with my marriage at that point, and I didn't run a marathon. It didn't happen. Didn't really follow through with it, and kind of was kicking myself about that. And then I found a 50K race out in Moab that I was like, "I'm going to run this." And so I signed up for the Arches Ultra and drove down to Moab and got the flu the night before, had a fever, was just dying. And I was like, "Oh man, I drove all the way to Moab. I'm going to do this thing." And so my first marathon was actually the Arches Ultra 50K, but it was great. I finished it. There was some challenges, obviously, being sick and all that stuff, but I finished it and I kind of got hooked on it. And the bike started collecting dust and started buying new running shoes too frequently after that. So, yeah. That's
Yeah,
kind of how I fell into this pit of ultra running that I can't get out of now.
it really is a pit too. Once you're in, it sort of starts dragging you down, and you start thinking, oh, I can do that. Like, oh, maybe I can do a little bit more, or maybe there's another challenge, and then before you know it, you're way down in there.
Oh,
So
oh
yes,
yeah.
I definitely feeling that one. So why the 50K in Moab? So I think Moab. I don't know. My geography's not great, but that's a few hours from Salt Lake, right? So what was it about that 50K?
I think it was just because the marathon idea I had in my head hadn't worked out, and I really just wanted to try and do a marathon or try and do a 50K, something of the marathon distance or a little more. And being
Yeah,
in winter in Utah, there wasn't many options, and I was like, all right, what's the next nearest thing
right.
I can do? And so it really was just timing. Moab's a little bit warmer in the winter than Salt Lake City, and 3.5 hours, not too long of a trek. So I'm very fortunate to be close to that area. The other nice thing about Moab, and I almost don't want to say this because I don't know how many people are going to listen, but um, the the best time to go is in the winter because it's not
Really?
packed with tourists. It's cold and inhospitable to many, but still, it's not like you can't go out on the trails in the winter in Moab. And so if you want to go to Moab when there isn't, Jeeps driving down the trails you're hiking on, and there's not just tourists everywhere and a huge traffic jam on Main Street and the hotels are expensive, go in like February and you'll have the place to yourself and you can get a motel for $50 a night. So
For sure, and I can attest to the challenges of driving around Moab at a busy time. Having been part of a crew out there, we took a wrong turn getting up to the Geyser Pass aid station. We went right up the back way, so we went all the way through all the jeeps and all the up the
oh
jeep
yeah.
trails. So yeah, we got a first hand look at all of the. I mean, there are just conga lines of jeeps out there, hitting those trails. So kind of fun. So that was your intro
Yeah.
to ultra running. Fast forward a good many years, and here you are finishing up your second Moab 240 race, which as I said, I think that's incredible. So right out of the gate, as far as sort of training or race preparation for your second go at Moab, how did that differ from the first? And were there any specific areas maybe that you focused on going into the second race with knowledge of what transpired during the first one?
Yeah. Well, I'll give you some background on the first one. I tend to be a little bit delusional about what I'm capable of, and I think that's maybe you have to be a little bit delusional to
Well,
to do
I
a
think that's a good
240
thing.
mile
Yeah,
race.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
So I had never run a 100-mile race, and I saw an Instagram post about Moab 240 right after I'd started running ultra marathons and really started taking running kind of seriously, and I was like, oh my god, this is a thing that exists. I had no idea. And so I just went out and registered for the Triple Crown of 200s without really researching it, and was
Ooh,
like, I'll figure this out. And
oh, you just went
uh,
all
i
in.
I did, and
Yeah.
I've been figuring it out since, to be honest. I have DNF'd Bigfoot twice. So in 2019, when I did the Moab 240, I DNF'd Bigfoot first, didn't start Tahoe, and then, to be honest, doing that, like I think I did 93 miles or something at Bigfoot, and then a month and a half, 2 months later, did Moab, and I think that big effort set me up for it pretty well.
Hmm.
Then this year, I DNF'd the Bigfoot 200 again. Um, I
Yeah.
got like 75 miles in, and that 75-mile run was a really good long run to have before the Moab 240. Um,
Lovely warm up that you had right
yeah,
there.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and I think all of my other training wasn't too crazy. I really don't try to do too much volume. I think my highest volume weeks are somewhere around 70 miles.
Mm.
Um, and I generally aim for 40 miles a week just all the time. I sort of try to keep a philosophy that I should be capable of running a 50K at any time.
Oh,
And
I like it. Yeah.
yeah, and I feel like running 40 miles a week keeps me there. I
Yeah.
have I have a toddler right now, so it's a lot more challenging to get out on the trails as much as I'd like. So I would
For
say
sure.
much of my training going into the Moab 240 this year was pushing a stroller with an unwieldy toddler from playground to playground on like our paved neighborhood trails, and stopping at playgrounds for a half hour and then going like, let's move on to the next playground. So
Yeah,
um,
I think it's absolutely awesome in a fantastic way that you can go and do training like that and still turn around and go finish a race like Moab 240. I mean, I think that gives me and anybody else listening a whole lot of like, oh wow, yeah, I don't have to go and spend 12 hours running a trail every Sunday in order to finish something like that. You can do it different
yeah,
ways for sure.
yeah, I think you can absolutely do it on marathon training. If you can train for a marathon, you can run the Moab 240. I
Yeah.
think part of that though is that you have to be mentally prepared for the pain and suffering that come with the distance, right? Um, yeah, I mean, it's it's not all. I
It's
mean,
one of
I
those things you can do a whole lot of physical training, right? But there's not many plans out there that touch on the mental side of stuff, and I think that's where certainly myself and others, maybe yourself too, you kind of have to figure that stuff out as you go because it's a roller coaster out there. And nobody really, when I started doing these things, nobody prepped me for that. There was a lot of physical training stuff out there, like you need to run this much, you need to do this many hours a week or whatever it was, but very little about the emotional roller coaster that is one of these events. And so you start getting into these, and it's a wild ride out there. So yeah,
it really is, and a lot of that is that you can't train for it. I mean, I think a lot of very successful ultra runners have had trauma in their lives, maybe that has trained them for it
yeah,
inadvertently. But really, nothing will train you for. People talk about the pain cave and stuff like that, but the only way to train for it is to go out and experience it and see
just
if
do
that's
it.
something you want to muscle through.
For sure. And I think that to me is one of the big benefits of doing these things too, because it is uncomfortable, and it's amazing how different people react when you put yourself in those situations. And I've run some long races, maybe not 240, but you can look around at a lot of these races and just look at people and know whether they have a pretty good chance of getting to the end by their attitude, when they're 80, 100 miles in. Are you smiling? Are you cracking a joke with somebody, or are you doing the death march already and just
Yeah,
trudging it out? So yeah, I do. I think the emotional thing is definitely something to work on as part of doing these. So did you, knowing that there was a lot of climbing, did you do any for the second go around? Did you focus more on sort of strength or any climbing specific training, or did you just kind of stick to the playground and the paths?
I stick to the playground and paths most of the time. When I do get the chance to have kind of a long weekend run, I'm very fortunate where I live. There's some trails that are like a mile from my house, so I just run out of my house and head up to the trails, and I can get a couple thousand feet on 10 miles or so. So I
Wow.
definitely do try to get more vertical training in. If I lived in a place like Kansas, I would probably be suffering and have to have like an incline trainer in my garage or something. It certainly helps to have some climbing on your legs before you go into something like this.
Yeah.
Um,
Oh,
I'm not huge on strength training. I do try to do body weight exercises. I'll do like push ups and crunches and planking and stuff like that. But uh,
yeah.
I'm not huge on it. I don't go to the gym. I, I
Uh,
find that if I have a barrier to entry for anything, it definitely messes me up. If I had to drive to the
yeah.
gym or drive to
Yeah,
a
like a
trailhead,
10-minute drive. Yeah, exactly. A 20-minute. It adds up over time, and you're just like, I just want to do something at home. Like, is there something I can do in my house for 10 minutes? Some plyometrics or something.
right,
Yeah.
plyometrics or some kind of, body weight exercises in my office while I'm on a break from work or something.
Yeah.
Um,
Pick up the toddler, bench press the toddler. I don't know.
definitely.
For sure. All right. So you've got your training, you've worked through pre-race prep. So I'm excited to hear about your race, because having been out there crewing, we got to see you at certain stages along the way. But
Yeah.
I'm really excited to hear from your perspective how your race went, start to when we saw you crossing the finish line there, because I think there's probably an awful lot to unpack doing that. And it's been a few weeks, and sometimes it takes a little while to get through emotionally a race like this. Like walk us through your race. What was it? So you're standing at the start line, you're ready to go. Are you nervous the second time? Are you kind of calm because you've been there and done it? Where are you at the start line?
I'll start a little before the start line, because I think maybe a month and a half before the race, I was out doing the Bigfoot race. And going into that race, I was anxious, overwhelmed with anxiety, just kind of a mess going into it. I overthought everything because I think I had DNF'd that race before. I think I was even more nervous. And then I did DNF the race again. And I drove home from Washington, and you sit there and start watching these Instagram posts of people that are out there doing the race that you just DNF'd, and they're still in it. And you're like, man, maybe I shouldn't have DNF'd it. Maybe I could still be out there. I don't know if you know who Sally McRae is.
Oh, yeah.
So I follow her on Instagram, and I saw this video of her just like suffering the last 10 miles into the aid station or to the finish line of Bigfoot. And she was like, I'm going to finish what I started. I'm going to follow through. She said, and I was like, oh man, it hit me right in the feels. And I was like, okay, Moab's coming up. I need to finish what I start. And so I set that, as one of my priorities going into Moab, was like, don't overthink it. Don't let yourself build this thing up to be something that's impossible ahead of time. You can do this. You've done it before. But there's a lot of self-doubt. Like, okay, I did it before in 2019. That was like, 5 years ago or something.
Yeah.
And I've since then gotten married. I've had a baby. Maybe my training isn't as good as it was before because now I have a baby, and I had all these doubts, but I was like, no, I can do this, and I'm going to finish what I start. And so, I didn't have a crew or pacers. I went down there alone and just tried not to overthink it. Spending a night alone in a hotel before the race is dangerous for me because that's putting me in a perfect position to just overthink things and get anxious and start freaking out. But I didn't get too anxious about it, and just thought like, okay, follow through. That is what we're going to learn here on this trip, is follow through and just keep moving forward. And there was a noon start time this year, which was new.
Yeah, that's different, right? Yeah, that's a change.
Yeah. I thought this is going to be amazing. I'll sleep in. I'll be starting the race well rested. And 5 a.m. on race day, I was up and wired. So I did not sleep in. Went into it tired, but that's okay. And I was grateful for the noon start time going through Lockhart Basin, because that is just so exposed, and you get sunburnt and fried to a crisp out there, and then you can't really DNF the race in that section anyway. So it's pretty difficult until I think mile 70 to drop from the Moab race, because it's so remote.
Yeah, inaccessible.
Which is a real blessing, because I think most people tend to kind of hit a wall around mile 60 or 70. And, a little bit of despair might start setting in. Things start hurting. People talk about marathon running, how you tend to bonk or hit a wall at like mile 20 or 22. I think in the ultra marathon world, at least my personal experience is like mile 60 or 70. That's when the wheels start to come off. Sometimes you need to, determine if you can patch it up and make it work or not, Yeah, so I'd say the first day of the race, though, it went great. I ran into your friend Agatha pretty early into the race, and we spent, I'd say, the first day together, and the first night, I think, I was feeling good, and I think attitude, I tried to stay positive, and I deal with pain by making jokes and saying stupid, goofy stuff a lot, and that helps a lot. So, yeah.
I think that first night was that quite a chilly night? Or was that the second night? One of them was really pretty chilly. Were you prepped for that going in? You're familiar with that?
Yeah, I'm pretty used to the cold and I don't mind it so much. It was weird though because as you're going through these little valleys or whatever, just you'll get like a wave of warm air and then a wave of very cold air. So it was sort of uncomfortable, I would say. But the first night wasn't necessarily the worst. I think the second night was a lot colder. Um,
Mm.
the third night, I went into that expecting it to be very cold and just layered up and had all this stuff on, and it wasn't as cold as I expected. So I don't know. I,
There you go.
I'd say I'd say the biggest challenge I had though was sleep or the lack thereof.
Had you planned, had you put together a pre-race plan for, okay, I'm going to sleep at Indian Creek and then I'm going to sleep at, wherever Shea or something. Did it work out, or were you
Yeah,
just kind of like, as and when I get
it,
it, I'm
it
taking it during the race?
well, I kind of had a rough plan going into it. I knew I was going to try to sleep for like an hour or two at Indian Creek and then, sort of wing it from there.
Mm.
Unfortunately, Indian Creek, I tried to sleep at the aid station. I think I frustrated Agatha because she wanted to leave, and I was like, "Yeah, I'm getting up." Um, but the problem with me and sleeping at an aid station is I tend to just lay there wanting to sleep, but then a runner comes in and they're ringing cowbells and people are talking, and so I spent a lot more time trying to sleep than actually sleeping, unfortunately.
Mm.
Um, and so I didn't get enough sleep at Indian Creek, and I just figured out like, all right, I'll have to wing it from here, and I sort of did. I'd say the best sleep I got throughout the race was just climbing into my mylar bivy on the side of the trail and setting an alarm for 5 or 10 minutes, and just those little 5 or 10 minute power naps make a world of difference. I think after I ran into you in the headed to Monticello Lake or something,
Yes,
I curled up
probably,
on the
yeah.
ground and yeah, I took a nap, and I think you guys passed me at that point. But yeah, I had a few real good, 5 or 10 minute naps that really are what I was living on for the whole race. So um,
Yeah, that's a lot to be said for a dirt nap too. Those sort of 10-minute get your head down and actually get some sleep. Because funnily enough, it's easier to sleep out on a quiet trail somewhere than it is, as you say, at a lively aid station with music going and lights and whatever. People coming in, people leaving. I mean, it's all over the place. So unless you've got an actual, because I saw a lot of those, what do you call them, like the motorhome RV type thing, and people were jumping in those,
yeah,
and I was like, man, that looks to be awesome. Next time I'm doing a race like this, I would look into that. But unless you have something like a car or one of those, yeah, I can see how it would be difficult to sleep at an aid station for sure.
oh, absolutely. So the first time I did the Moab race, I had my wife crewing for me, and
Oh,
she
cool.
had my car. And so when I would get to an aid station where I was planning to sleep, she had a bed made up in the back, and I just crawled in there and got really good sleep. But if you go into a tent with a cot or an air mattress, and there's like other runners coming and going from the tent, rummaging through their bags, and the cowbells going and people cheering when runners come in. It's just, yeah, I'd say that sleeping on the side of the trail is drastically better than trying to sleep at an aid station unless you have a support vehicle.
How did you find
Yeah.
your bivy bag? Did it work for you? Because I've always like, I always, I don't know. It I like the idea of the trail naps, but getting that thing out and getting in it and then trying to put the damn thing away again, and I'm like, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know if it's worth it. So I don't know what your take on
this
bivy
is
bag napping is.
this is the first time I actually tried the bivy bag napping, and I had those same concerns. I was like, well, I'm never ever going to get this thing rolled back up into the tight little package it came in. But I will say they're shockingly warm.
Really? Yeah.
For being a Mylar space blanket, I mean, you get in that thing and you feel like a Chipotle burrito. Um, you know,
Yeah.
especially when there's mountain lions and bears out there. You're like, let me just make myself a burrito. Cool. But they're really quite warm. You get in it, super warm, zero padding, of course. So
Hmm.
If you take your power nap on a pebble, that pebble will be there reminding you that you didn't find a suitable spot the entire time. Um, the one big drawback to them is that they don't breathe. So, you climb into this plastic metal bag covered in sweat and then perspire during your power nap. And as soon as you get out, you're just way colder.
Ooh.
So you got to plan on getting out of that bivy sack and moving to warm back up because they're pretty toasty inside. It's surprising how
Yeah.
warm they are.
Yeah, and I've the naps I've done have been without the baby bag because I'm like I'm not dealing with that issue. So it's good to know that they actually perform as stated. And
Yeah.
I will tell you, Glenn and I. So Agatha was really keen to get her bag rolled up and stuffed back in there. So twice, Glenn and I did that as crew, and we got it down, man. But it took two of us to like hold it and twist it and turn it
You
and roll it,
actually were
and
able to get it back
twice,
into the.
yeah, twice.
That's
But I would
impressive.
not advise doing that as a solo runner because you'd be spending an hour doing that. So I totally
No.
get it as just stuff that thing in, man, and go. But yeah,
Yeah, my strategy is like roll it up into a big poofy ball and strap it onto the back of your pack and
that's
hope it
it.
survives.
There you go.
They're
We're
great though.
doing live tips here on the podcast for how to run with how to use your bivy bag in the real world,
Yeah.
not like the
Um,
advert when you buy it.
yeah. Speaking of gear, I tried something new this time that I had never done. I trained with it a little bit on the advice of there's kind of a veteran 200-mile runner named Phil Clark, and there's a Facebook group for the thing, and he'd mentioned using a hip belt along with your running vest, and I use a Ultraspire gear primarily, and I have a
Yeah,
Ultraspire Zygos pack
yeah.
and an Ultraspire Speed Goat
Oh,
running belt.
is that with the double holster? Yeah,
Yeah, it's got two water bottle
yeah.
holders, and it really is a great place to stow your trekking poles too in the front of it. So um, I thought this is going to be overkill, but it really was great because I sort of hate having the water bladder. I used it just for the real dry sections of the race, and then ditched it. But yeah, the vest with the running belt was a really great setup. I like the.
Did you have the bottles in the belt, or were you using the bottle pouches to stuff, I don't know, food or whatever else?
No, I had two water bottles in the belt, and then
Gotcha.
two water bottles in my vest. So
Yeah, yeah.
four water bottles, which might be overkill for some people. But on the Moab race, there's really not a lot of opportunities to filter water, so
Hmm.
you really have to carry a fair amount through some of those sections. And what I think the real benefit of that is that you have some of the weight on your hips, not on your shoulders the whole time. My shoulders get sore. I try to train with my vest, but most of my training is pushing a stroller, so
Yeah,
wearing you get all the mandatory gear into a vest and it gets pretty hefty. So,
yeah,
um,
for
you
sure.
know, just putting some of that weight on my hips was a huge improvement. So I'd recommend going with the vest and the water belt.
Nice combo there. I think
Yeah.
that's a great recommendation. And the other thing I can see there, I don't know whether you tried this or no, but when you've got four individual bottles, you can mix and match what you're bringing with you, right? You could have a mix in one and three waters or however you want to do it. So I think from that perspective, that could be super useful too.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, because I like to have, like liquid IV or Tailwind or something in some of my
Hmm.
bottles. And sometimes, if you're feeling a little sick, you might just want more water or more electrolytes. Or, one thing the Destination Trail races have started doing that I love is they have like juice at the aid stations. And, normally I get to an aid station and I'm like, give me some Coca-Cola or give me,
Oh yeah.
ginger ale. But juice is pretty awesome to have. It's great to have some apple juice or something. So yeah, it was nice to be able to mix it up and have a little variety.
Now talking aid stations, I know when we hit the aid stations, there was a variety of stuff there. Are you somebody who do you go all in for whatever you've got at the aid station? If it's a burger or a cheese quesadilla or whatever it is, do you go for that stuff, or are you like, no, I'm on Morton or Tailwind or whatever, and did it change during the race? Like, did you ever kind of get sick of what you were doing and just go, yeah?
I tend to stick with like bacon and cheese quesadillas or like breakfast burrito type things. Every aid station was like, "Oh, do you want a cheeseburger? Oh, do you want a cheeseburger?" And it terrified me, the idea of eating a cheeseburger. It just seemed too heavy, too much, a lot
And
of risk.
you just never know in those. I mean, I've done that before and paid for it, 2 miles later,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah. One time I ate a hot dog at a race and was like, "Oh my God, what have I
Oh.
done?" And then other times I've eaten a hot dog at an aid station and been like, "That was manna from heaven." So, and I'd say this time around I stuck to what I knew would be safe, which is like bacon and cheese quesadillas with
Mm.
guacamole, and that's kind of a go-to of mine. But as the race wore on, later in the race, day 3 and 4, I started accepting the cheeseburgers, and was glad I did.
Sure. Yeah, for
Um,
sure.
yeah, nighttime I was hitting the hot drinks pretty hard, like
Mm.
instant coffee with hot cocoa in it, or like the hot apple cider, or like broth with a little bit of instant mashed potatoes mixed in to make it creamy. When I'm
Ooh.
cold, I like the hot drinks, but during the day, I started moving into the cheeseburger territory, and it was well worth it. So
Yes, it's I don't know, it's dangerous for me, that, but there are some distinct payoffs. I mean, when you get one or maybe two of those, that's also something you can eat on the move, so it's pretty easy to eat while you're
yeah,
going. So you can grab one and leave, down the trail. But slightly dicey territory for me, that.
oh for sure. Yeah, and food on the go is great. I tend to have them pack me peanut butter and jelly sandwiches, to just stick in my pocket or something, and that's great to have. I don't really like the gels, and I get sort of burned out on the candy eventually. But gummy bears, I like gummy bears. I probably ate like 50 packs of gummy bears, little individual Costco packets. So,
Dude, I am really picky when it comes to gummy bears, though. They've got to be the gold Haribo gummy bears. I can't do
oh
any of
yeah,
the sort of knockoff gummy bears. Just don't work for me. And then when they get really cold, it's a total sidebar for gummy bears, but I really do like them. And ultra racing has got me into gummy bears. But yeah, if they're cold, they're really challenging to chew. So like if you
hmm
get them at night and it's a cold night, I'm not sure I really want these, because you got to chew on
yeah.
these
It takes a
things, and
lot more work,
your
and
jaw gets sore chewing on these dang gummy bears. But yeah, I'm a fan of gummy bears, but it's got to be Haribo for me. I think.
Haribo is definitely my preferred brand of gummy. But I'll take what I can get. I'm not too picky.
Total
um,
sidebar.
yeah,
Yeah.
no, if you want to talk about a weird sidebar, I was running with a woman, Amber, a good portion of the race, I'd say.
Yes. Yeah, I remember Amber.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Once, I ran probably the first portion of it with Agatha, and once Glenn showed up, her husband, they kind of took off, and there was no chance I was going to keep up with them. She was moving along at a really good clip, and Glenn, he's fast too. So
Yeah.
they were kind of goners, and I started hanging out with Amber, and she had some kind of like airhead chews or something like that, and she offered me one, and I ate it, and it was the best candy I think I've ever had. The moment was right or something, and I was like, "Oh
Oh.
my God, airhead chews from Costco! I need to find these for my next race because hit the spot."
Wow. So they were like
Yeah,
the like chewy candy, I guess, if they were
yeah, it was like
chews.
a chewy candy, but I don't know. They were super good. But
Ah.
when you're in a race, certain things taste amazing, and then you go home and
Mm.
try one, and you're like, "That's just
No. What on earth was
fine,
I
sure,
thinking? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
For
yeah."
sure. Yeah. So while we're on the gear and equipment topic, was there, aside from the Ultra Spire waist pack, in addition to your regular Ultra Spire pack, was there any other gear that you took this time that you didn't last time, or upgraded that made a significant difference, good or bad, I suppose,
Uh, you know,
throughout your race?
I pretty much tried to stick with things I know. I really like Ultra shoes. There's been a lot of talk about their quality and durability going downhill,
Mm.
but I went into this race with a brand new pair of Ultra Lone Peaks that I had never worn before, which
Ooh,
is a little risky.
a little,
Um,
yeah.
yeah, but they were great and they held up really well.
Had you trained in Lone Peaks, or I mean, were you familiar with Lone Peaks beforehand? So you,
I'd say I did most of my trail runs in Lone Peak sixes, and then I went and
yeah,
bought a pair of Lone Peak sevens right before this, and was like, tried them on, was like, well, they seem to fit about the same. I'll just take these. Um,
good
so
man. Live dangerously. I like it. Just go
yeah,
for it.
so
Go for it.
so a new model of Lone Peaks I tried on the race, and they worked out great. As far as other gear that I absolutely don't think I could do one of these without is the Lecky poles with the shark
Mm.
grip gloves.
Yep, yep.
Have you ever used those?
I haven't. No, I've mine are the black diamond, the graphite
Okay.
ones, but I see plenty of people using the Lecky poles, with the gloves. Yeah.
Yeah, the gloves they're amazing because you just keep the gloves on and they have a little button you click on the top that detaches the glove from the pole. So they're sort of like quick release gloves that are just attached to your hands. And I use those black diamond Z poles sometimes, and they're pretty good. But I feel like the glove makes all the difference. So the Lecky shark grip, I think they're called. I don't know. The Lecky
Yeah.
poles with the detachable gloves are amazing. I mean, they really are a game changer for me. So
And did you use
big
those
fan.
throughout, or were you like, "Hey, I'm not going to use poles until I start climbing out of Indian Creek, or I get up to Shea, or I'm not gonna, I'm gonna, or are you just, I'm just going to use them if I feel like I need them, I'm going to use them."
I use them if I feel like I need them pretty much most of the race. They're annoying to me on slick rock. So,
Mm.
if you're on the slick rock, they don't really do much for you there because they're just clanking against the ground. But I'd say the vast majority of the race, I use them. If I'm on some tricky stuff that I want to use my hands to keep from falling, I'll
Yeah.
stow them. But yeah, I mean, I'm definitely back of the pack. Much, I mean, I think I finished with 15 minutes to spare. So
It was
we were
epic, I have to tell you.
we
We
were
love
we
those
were
finishes.
pushing it real close.
Yeah.
Um, didn't get DFL, but we saw him behind us and had to run to keep him from passing us. So uh,
Oh, a bit of encouragement towards the end there. Yeah, so I think on our trip through your Moab experience, I think we got halfway. So were there any kind of in between there and your 15 minutes to spare? Where was your head? Like, were you up? Were you down? Like, did you always feel like, yeah, I fairly got this in the bag, or was there a particular aid station where you were like, I need to get here, otherwise I'm not sure? I mean, we were up at Geyser Pass, and we saw a lot of people, get timed out at that particular aid station, including Agatha. But there was some really emotional crew and supporters up at that particular aid station, for instance. So, was there any point
yeah,
along the way where you kind of felt like, oh, I'm behind schedule here, I really need to get booking it, or were you pretty comfortable cruising at a solid speed throughout?
I would say I was pretty comfortable and confident that I would finish the race until 5 or 6 miles out from Geyser Pass.
Mm.
There's a lot of climbing to get to Geyser Pass. I think we were all pretty sleep deprived. I was with Amber and a guy, Doug, at that point, and we were sort of in this like, oh, only 3 miles to the aid station, only 3 miles to the aid station for like 6 or 7, 8 miles, maybe more. I think we got off trail for about a mile, lost the trail,
Oh,
realized we were off, found our way
yeah.
back. But yeah, it just sort of felt like I was never going to get to Geyser Pass. And then I started looking at the time and where I was and was like, oh, there's a very real possibility that I'm going to get cut for time at Geyser Pass. Now, Debbie, she was crewing with you guys for Agatha.
Oh,
She
yes.
was a freaking lifesaver. As I was coming into Geyser Pass, there was Debbie on the trail, and she was like, "You got to pick up the pace, buddy." And
That sounds exactly like what you would have said too. Yeah.
yeah, she really got me motivated. She got me in and out of that aid station so quick. I got in there, and she was like, "All right, you don't have time for Jack. Let's take everything out of your pack that's unnecessary. Lighten the load." She was like a Formula One pit crew. So she was literally just a blessing to have there. And I was glad that I knew her at that point, because I don't know if I would have made it out of that aid station as quickly as I did. But yeah, she got me just fixed up, made sure I had my mandatory gear and nothing else, basically. Had what I needed, got me a huge cheeseburger, well done, with guacamole and all the stuff, and just booted me out of the aid station before I got timed out. And, I remember very painfully walking out of that aid station with a cheeseburger in my hand and just going to the nearest patch of shade I could find and sitting down and being like, oh my God, okay, we don't have much time here. We
Yeah.
got to figure this out and got to keep moving, or I'm not going to finish the race. And so it got a little sketchy from that point on. The Geyser Pass aid station is at the bottom of this long gravel road, and it's just uphill from there. You just got to trek up this long, kind of arduous gravel road for a while. And Amber and I were stuck together there and just started, making it up the road. And we ran into Doug, who had a pacer. And I'd say Amber's forethought to be like, we got to see if Doug will let us go with them and hang out with this pacer, because we're not thinking clearly, and we're not going to finish this unless we can keep a certain pace. We need someone that can tell us what that pace is, because our math is sleep
Gone.
deprived crazy
Yeah.
person math.
Yeah. Yeah, for
Like
sure.
her and I were talking, and we're like, okay, well, we have to keep this pace. Well, no, we have, and we were trying to reason out like how fast we had to keep moving, if we could stop for a 5-minute nap, what we had to do to finish the race. And we were clearly not making sense to each other. So I'm very grateful that she was like, let's catch up to Doug and ask if we can hang with him and his pacer. And we did. I met this guy, Dustin, he had run the first, I don't know, 60 or 70 miles of the race or something, and DNF'd because he wasn't, some people are like, if I'm not running the race I expect of myself, I'll drop,
Yeah.
as opposed to me, that's like, I'll drop only if I'm like crying in the corner, which happens a lot. But so he had DNF'd and come out to pace, and he had fresh legs. He had an awesome attitude. He was just, keeping us on time, and like, okay, you guys have 5 minutes to sit here, but after that, we're moving, we're going, keep moving forward. And so I'd say the last 40 miles of the race, he kept us right on track where we needed to be. And yeah, having a pacer that last 40 miles was a game changer. I don't know,
Mm.
I would have been stumbling around in the dark, hallucinating probably, without someone that had, the clarity to help guide us on the right speed and path.
Brilliant. Yeah, it was a warm day as well. I think I think it was pretty exposed out on that road going down or going to Porcupine. I think that was a pretty hot
Yeah,
day. Were you kind of
it
feeling it at that
was.
point?
Yeah, it was pretty hot. It was hot and kind of dusty. I sort of developed a cough over the race just from breathing in all the dust. And so, yeah, definitely coughing a bunch, and the heat and the dust. And I hadn't planned my clothing very well in the drop bag, so I was wearing like all dark colors, which didn't turn out great. But yeah, I mean, it was really nice to get to that Porcupine Rim aid station and know that there was just 20 miles left. And that last 20 miles, though, is brutal. You're, yeah, maybe the last 10 miles is even more brutal, because you're kind of coming down these cliffs, and it's dark, and you're very sleep deprived, and it's probably pretty dangerous, I would say, as far as the
Gee.
exposure. And like, you could very easily hurt yourself or die coming down that last section before you hit the road. But yeah, it turned out really well. I mean, I went into it thinking I don't need a crew or pacers. I can do this all on my own. And it's very possible I could have, but teaming up with some other runners and kind of,
Yeah.
getting the benefits of their amazing crew and pacers was definitely a godsend for me. So
And I think that for me anyway, that's part of the ultra community. That's why I like to do these things, because that's happened to me and others as well. And I think just the willingness of other people's crews to go outside of their runner when they're able, and to help out whomever and whenever. That's just fantastic, and that doesn't happen, I don't think, in other sports. There's no crewing in marathons, and it just the
Yeah.
whole community is out there to help everybody get to the end. And I really love that about this. It's aside from maybe the top couple of percent who are out there, actually racing the thing, most of
Hmm.
us are just out there trying to get to the finish. And I just love the fact that you can rely on other racers or other people's paces, or whomever, crew from wherever. I think that's brilliant and totally unique in this sport.
Oh, for sure. It's very much an individual sport. If you're maybe, if you're a mortal like I am, it becomes more of a team sport. These longer races, I always tend to meet people, and you sort of it's like a team sport where you form your team as you go,
Yeah.
which is really cool. And you create friendships and learn from other people along the way. And yeah, maybe these very hardcore people that are winning these races, or getting on the podium, they're way more dialed in than I am, and maybe can dedicate more of their life to it than I can. But yeah, I think it's pretty amazing, the selflessness and contributions from other crews and other
Yeah.
runners too. It's pretty cool. The big takeaway for me from this race was that it felt like everyone wanted me to succeed. There was crew and pacers and volunteers that just they're out there, donating their time, so that I can have this amazing experience. And it's pretty cool. Definitely makes me want to go out and volunteer at one of these races and kind of give back.
Well, we'll get into future Casey here in a
Oh
minute, but I
yeah.
do want to go back. I wanted to go back real quick to a comment you made, which I think is a sort of a really experienced comment about your exit from the Geyser Pass aid station. Because a lot of people would sit in the aid station and worry about how much time they've got left, and then be looking at your watch, and I gotta
Yeah.
go. But I think it's a really smart move on your part, and just generally speaking, a very experienced move to get into the aid station, get what you need, and leave, and then sit down and figure out, okay, what am I going to do, having already left, so I can't get timed out. It's those
Yeah.
little things, I think, that you learn over time. But I love that move. I think it's a super smart move, and a great tip for anybody listening. I think that's a wonderful little tidbit right there.
Yeah, that's the dangerous place to be, is in the aid station. First of all, you're comfortable. They're going to bring you what you want. The volunteers are going to bring you delicious food and drinks to your heart's content. You got your shoes off, so your feet are feeling good. You're sitting down in a comfortable chair. Those are all
Yeah.
very dangerous things if your goal is to keep moving forward, right?
Yes, for sure, for sure. And they're not going to kick you out. They're not, well, they're unlikely,
No,
potentially, most
they'll
of them,
try to
to say, "Oh,
motivate
you
you
need to
and
leave."
talk you
Yeah,
out of it,
yeah. Hey,
but
just sit
that's also
here.
where you DNF. You don't DNF on the side of the road or the side of the trail. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
There's hope when you're outside of the aid station, but when you're in an aid station, that's where you're going to get a ride back to your hotel or whatever, and that's dangerous if you want to finish one of these things. Comfort is right. I find
yes,
that I love a good sitting rock or a good sitting tree that's tipped over or whatever. If I find a nice chair shaped rock out there, I'm usually very drawn to it, and we'll sit down on it. And it's like, man, this sitting feels amazing. But once I start to feel comfortable, that's when it's time to remind myself that, like,
hey,
you got to move.
yeah. We've still got a race to get through here. Yeah, for
Yeah,
sure.
the clock is ticking for sure. Yeah, I mean, getting in and out of the aid stations is always a struggle for me. I think if I could work to get better at that, I'd probably finish one of these things a lot faster. But yeah, if I'd stayed in that aid station,
I am curious too, Casey. You talk about could maybe finish one or two of these. So when you go stalk the ultra sign up, as most of us do, for each other. So you've done a lot of 50K and 50 milers, and then this total polar opposite of 240 miles. Like are you thinking about an in between at any point, or are you just gonna do the 50s and throw in these 240s.
Well, my next race is a 50 miler in February. So I'm looking forward to that. What I like about a 50K or a 50 miler is I'm confident in it. I think a lot of these races, you go into them, and if there's, it's a little more, I don't know, I don't want to say more fun because it's not. It's a different experience when you're confident you can finish it, because then you're more focused on like how fast can I finish it, or how well will I feel after finishing this race.
Yeah,
Um,
the fear
like I
of not
haven't,
finishing is not there as much. Now, there are some
yeah,
50Ks and 50 miles, but yeah, generally speaking,
for sure, for sure. I have not ever DNF'd a 50K or a 50 miler yet, I'll say. Um, so I'm generally confident going into one of those that I can at least finish it, and then I can try to put more focus on like trying to do better, or maybe set a better time, or maybe have a better time. With the bigger distance, the 200 milers, based on my track record, there's a very good chance I will fail. There's a very real possibility of failure, and I'm doing something that's really outside of my comfort zone. And I love that too. It's a completely different kind of challenge.
yeah.
I really like running half marathons as well on the road, gasp.
Ah,
But like running a half marathon, you get a medal at the end, which is kind of cool, I guess. And I can go run a half marathon. They start super early in the morning usually. I can be home having
yeah.
run a race, feeling good about doing something, and get
Move
home and
on
the
with the
family's
day.
getting out of bed, having
Yeah.
breakfast, and they're not like, "Where have you been for 5 days, Dad?"
Yeah, exactly. There's a little bit of that for me too. Like when you go and do these big races, it takes a lot of planning and time away. And, there's people behind the scenes then that have to fill in when you're not there for literally 5 days in some of these cases. So, yeah. And
Yeah, my wife had to be a single mother for 5 days while I was out in Moab having a great experience, and so that's,
yeah.
I mean, you talk about the sacrifice of crews and pacers and all these things. Um, Yeah, my wife got to stare at a dot on a map moving at 2 miles an hour for 5 days, worrying, in the
Yeah.
middle of the night.
Like, oh, it hasn't moved.
um,
What's going? Yeah, I'm familiar. I do like the half marathons though. They're just long enough to still be somewhat challenging
hmm
in mileage and time, but not long enough to really like batter you where
Yeah,
marathons and beyond. You're like, I need some time to recover here. So,
I don't
um,
know. It depends on how. I mean, yeah, I think that I did a half marathon this spring and I set a personal record. Um,
oh,
I went pretty quick.
congratulations! Yeah.
Yeah, I think it was like an hour and 25 minutes or something.
Oh my
So
gosh,
incredibly
that's
fast for
that's
a guy
pretty
like me.
quick. That's really
It was
quick.
all
Yeah.
downhill. But yeah, it was quick. And then I couldn't walk up or down my stairs for 3 or 4 days afterward.
Yeah.
And if you contrast that with the Moab 240, after that race, I was walking around just fine, which is weird, right?
Yeah, talking of recovery. So what is your recovery? Do you have a strategy for recovery, or is it just like, do you go spa day, or I don't know, what does your recovery look like after one of
uh, you
these
know,
big races?
I like a good bath or a good cold shower. I try to keep moving, but like slower,
Hmm.
like active recovery type stuff. I
Oh,
think I
right.
was out going for a walk the next day for a couple miles, and took my 2-year old on a little hike to go look for fall leaves, stuff like that. And I think maybe week and a half, 2 weeks later, I ran an unofficial marathon here. So
Oh,
that was
wow.
kind of stupid but fun.
Wow, that's
They have
bold.
this well, they have this thing called a whale-a-thon. There's a big whale statue in the middle of a roundabout
A whale? Like
downtown.
a
A
like a
whale,
a
a
whale,
blue
like,
whale,
yeah, a
like a
whale.
like
Okay.
a life-size blue whale statue, which is out of
Wow.
place for Salt
Well,
Lake.
that was my
Um,
very next question. Like, what is this blue whale statue doing in the middle of Salt Lake? I don't
well,
know.
yeah, and I mean, I think the city councilor, whoever put it there, and people were sort of like scratching their heads, like, why is there a giant blue whale statue when we're 1,000 miles from the ocean? um,
Yeah.
but the
Yeah.
whale ushered in like one of the best snow seasons we've had, and so there's kind
Ah.
of hail the whale as a thing. Some people started doing whale-a-thon. It's in the middle of a roundabout, so it's a 0.04 mile loop around the whale, and a well-a-thon is you
Oh,
do like 600 and something laps around the well. And so I thought,
oh,
I better get on that while I still, I mean, after you do a 240-mile race, the idea of doing 26 miles isn't so daunting,
yeah,
for a couple weeks. You're like, oh, 26 miles, that's like the distance between an aid station, kind of, and a little
yeah.
extra. And so I went out there and did like 638 laps around the well. Definitely not my fastest marathon. I took my time, did it at night, so it was a little cooler. But yeah, I've just tried to get right back into my 40 miles a week after about 2 weeks of taking it kind of easy. I think the biggest issue I've had is just my feet sort of falling apart. I had a few blisters, nothing crazy, but it's like my feet have decided to shed a whole layer of skin since the race. It's been about a month and a half now. I'm
Yeah.
still picking dead skin off my feet, to my wife's
Wow.
dismay.
Doing it in the living room while you're watching TV or whatever,
Oh, she's absolutely like, you need to leave and do that somewhere else.
Go elsewhere. Yeah, 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 for
Yeah,
sure. I've
yeah.
had those conversations myself. Yes, been the recipient of the order to leave. Did you have
Right.
any other niggles throughout the race? Was the feet the major kind of thing for you, or was there any other like knees? I know I when I uphills I'm great with. I can go uphill all day long, but downhill for me is a real challenge. It's just that I had a lot of rugby growing up as a kid, and
Mm.
so my knees are just all kinds of shot out of proportion. So I have a challenge going downhill with knees. How about you? What did you feel?
I tend to have knee trouble on the downhills as well. So I am a lot more conservative with going
Mm,
downhill. A lot of people like run the downhills, and I'm like,
yeah,
oh, I'll try to run the uphill and walk the downhill.
yeah,
um, but
yeah.
my knees did great, surprisingly. I had a kind of a hip sort of thing going on most of the race, but yeah, I had a hip. I don't know if it's like a hip tightness in the muscle or something. I'd gone to a physical therapist before the Bigfoot race and had him look at it, and they were like, "Yeah, you
Right.
need to do more stretching." And so I've kind of introduced a little bit more stretching into my recovery and race prep. I'm not
Cool.
great at sticking with it, but um, but I've at least learned some stretches that help. So I had like a little hip stiffness throughout the race, but I started the race with that, and it just kind of got worse as the race went on, of course. But I wouldn't. I mean, surprisingly, my body held up better this race than it has many of my other races in the past. So I think a lot of that has to do with just the slower pace that I was going.
Yeah.
Um, I mean, I averaged around 2 miles an hour. So, a casual walk, really. And I think slowing down makes a massive difference. A lot of times I'll go out on even a 50K a little too hot, and then
Mm.
I have trouble with nutrition, and I have trouble with, cramps or, knee and hip pain or foot pain. But I started this race pretty
Okay.
slow and kept a slow pace the whole time, and that made a world of difference for all of the things.
Yeah.
For being able to eat cheeseburgers at the end of the race, and being able to eat a lot more and drink a lot more without feeling sick and just not beating myself up. I think, yeah,
Yeah, the lesser impact and less sort of, I mean, there's obviously some digestive challenges when you're going 200 miles. It's 200 miles. But yeah, the more you
right,
can keep yourself eating real food and a lot of it, I think the better your chances are of finishing for
absolutely.
sure. Yeah. So we touched on future, Casey. What other races do you have coming up? Is Moab your race now? Like, is this it, or is there a triple Moab coming up? What about it? I think I saw you signed up for Tahoe this go around or next year. Cocodona, maybe. I don't know. What are your future
Oh,
plans?
Cocodona looks amazing. I'd love to try that. So this year I'm going to try to. So I've tried to do the Triple Crown of 200s several years now. Since that first year, I've learned a lot of things about getting to the start line being so hard logistically. I have 6 children. I have a full-time job. I have a lot in my life, and so to prioritize the Triple Crown of 200s is very difficult. The COVID thing put a damper on things. Illnesses and family obligations have all put a
Right.
damper on it. I have many reasons and excuses for why I'm still not completed the Triple Crown of 200s. But it's definitely a big goal of mine. This year, I'm not going to go for it. I'm going to do the Tahoe 200 in June,
Yeah.
which I've never actually started, and so I'm really looking forward to that race.
Hmm.
And I am going to try to get into the Bear 100 or the Wasatch 100.
Right.
And
Excellent.
I think those 100-mile races they're a different kind of challenge than a 200. You have a much tighter cutoff time. You really got to move a little quicker. With
Yeah, there's
yeah,
less room for error, I would say, or less room to recover if you make an error. Where on 200s you got
yeah,
5 days, right? But 100, no, you got like 30, probably 34 hours max.
exactly. You can really fast pack Moab 240, and
Yeah.
sleep and hang out in the aid station and eat a cheeseburger and those things. But a 100-mile race is a lot different. So I'd like to, finish a 100-miler, which I've never done. I'd like to, do this 50-miler I have in the spring. Well, I guess February is the middle of winter, but yeah, I only have like 3 races on my agenda for the year, and that's the Red Hot 50-miler in Moab, which they've never done a 50-mile version of that race. So I'm looking forward to that, and
Excellent.
going to try to get into the Bear, the Wasatch, and the Tahoe 200. So maybe the year after that or the following year, I'll be able to go out for the Triple Crown of 200s again, or maybe try the Cocodona. I'd like to someday maybe do something like Vol State. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Ooh, yes, absolutely, for
I
sure.
mean, they give you 10 days or something. So,
I love the large ones. There's another race out there called Fools 409, which is a 400-mile version. Same kind of deal. It's sort of a do-it-yourself. It's across New York State,
oh, that sounds interesting.
right along the lake. I forget the lake. Is it Ontario? Whichever lake that is at the top
Yeah.
of New York State, and then it goes into the Adirondacks and over the
Oh, that sounds
Adirondacks and
amazing.
finishes on the border with Vermont. But yeah, it's the same. It's exactly the same kind of style as Vol State. This sort of do-it-yourself. You're on your own. It's on a road, going town to town,
Yeah.
making your own way. I love those styles of races. I think very different.
There's a lot more big races kind of coming out now. I mean, like there's this Mighty Gallatin race that's sort of a stage race that's really
Mm.
interesting looking. And I mean, I found this race on Ultra Sign Up. I don't know how real it is even, but it's like Salt to Sulphur. It's like a 420-mile race from Salt Lake to West Yellowstone or something like that. Or
Wow.
but but it's like $40 to register, and they're like, "What do you get? Nothing." It's like
Yeah.
self-supported, and I'm like,
Yes,
"Well, that
pretty
sounds kind
much.
of cool," but yeah. So I mean, I like the idea of the longer distances. Ultimately, I'm in it for the experience and kind of proving to myself that some regular dude that wasn't ever super athletic can still do crazy stuff and have a great experience and learn and grow. And yeah.
Yeah. I love it, and that's definitely why I'm into it. I know there's a whole bunch of other folks thinking the exact same way. It's all about the journey and growth and the challenge. I mean, for me, I think we live in a world where everything is about convenience. How convenient is it that I can order food off an app on my phone and somebody comes and delivers it to the house? That's
Oh
wild. I
yeah,
mean, it's great, but I don't know that you learn anything about yourself like that. Where is the
exactly.
challenge of life? And I'm with you. I think signing up for these big ones is more of a growth opportunity and something to challenge. And I love the idea that you may not finish this. I mean, it's
Hmm.
definitely not a guarantee that you'll even finish. Never mind, post a good time or anything. It's just like, there's a very real chance you won't finish this race. And so I love that challenge, and that's it's kind of why I do these things and
Yeah.
help others do these things too. It's really cool. So yeah, so I appreciate you being with us today, Casey. As we wrap up, pretty awesome conversation. Definitely want to take a minute to say thanks for joining us. Your journey through not one but two Moab 240 races, pretty inspirational, and obviously your passion for ultra running shines through. Before we sign off, do you have any final thoughts or words of wisdom you would share with anybody listening who might be considering stepping into the world of ultra running?
Yeah, I think I kind of have this philosophy that anybody who is capable of, you know, walking up or down a flight of stairs or moving their body can do way bigger things than they think. Don't let, fear of failure hold you back. And you should definitely aim for things that seem out of your reach because they're probably more within your reach than you realize. So,
Brilliant. Well, thank you again, Casey. Really appreciate the time. To anybody listening, thanks for tuning in. I hope today's episode has inspired you, whether you're a seasoned runner, a beginner, or just somebody fascinated by the capabilities of the human mind and spirit. Definitely remember, as Casey alluded to, it's about setting your own pace and embracing the journey, not really about the distance, although it is awesome to finish a 240-mile race and brag about it down the pub, So don't forget to follow the podcast for more inspiring stories and conversations. You can find us on social media. We're also out there at choosetoendure.com. So be sure to head over there if you have a moment. Once again, Casey, thanks. Really appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Huge congrats on the just amazing achievement at Moab 240. And I know I, for one, will be eagerly watching when you next put your running shoes on. I'll be the dot watcher, seeing where you're going. So for now, this is Richard Gleave and Casey Sanders signing off. Until next time, remember to run long, run strong, and keep choosing to endure.
Thanks for running with us at the Choose to Endure podcast. We hope you enjoyed the show. We had a blast. If you did, make sure to like, rate, and review. And we'll be back soon. Keep racking up the miles and the stories, and we'll catch you at the next trailhead. Until then, remember to run long, run strong.